Hello, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sherry Kraber, and I am a consultant, a DOE consultant with Studies Incorporated, based here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I am excited to present this topic to you today, the art of design augmentation and how to add runs to existing designs, which is a frequently asked question. People are always wondering how they can do it and what makes the most sense for you. So since there are going to be a lot of people on today, we will keep everybody on mute. You can enter your questions into the questions panel, and I will do my best to answer them at the end of the session. If I don't get to your question, then I will follow up afterwards with an email directly to you. If you have questions later on, you are welcome to send them to stathelp@staties.com. I will see them there along with our other instructors. This presentation is being recorded and will be posted on our webinars page on our website and also on our YouTube channel, Statistics Made Easy by StatEase. And that is a great source for more content. If you like what you see today, I encourage you to check out everything that we have on our YouTube channel. We've been building that up over the past few years, and it really has a lot of great topics on it. So design augmentation is really an art. There is definitely an art to it, as well as, a bit of a science. But the key to it is first understanding your existing data. What do you have in hand right now? What information does it provide? What is it missing? And what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve out of this, out of the augmentation? Things like, do you want to estimate a higher order polynomial? Are you trying to collect more data to fill out your design space? Or maybe there's a specific area of the design space that you want to cover more thoroughly. Maybe you want to improve the prediction capability in a certain area and reduce the standard error of predictions. We can use software to help choose the runs, but ultimately subject matter knowledge and an understanding of your specific goals is the key to deciding the best augmentation path. Software is especially going to be helpful for choosing runs that estimate a higher order polynomial. It is not necessarily as good at filling out the design space, especially if you have a really specific area of interest. And so you may need to manually add some runs yourself. So we're going to consider those issues today. So here is our agenda for today. First of all, we are just going to consider the structure of a traditional DOE so that you can compare that to what you have and figure out what you need to add to the table. Then we'll consider some goals of design augmentation, and then we will look at a couple of really interesting cases. So your first piece of information is to have a background understanding of traditional design of experiments. DOE is done to improve a product or process, to gain more subject matter knowledge. You're either trying to maximize or minimize or something, or you are simply trying to understand what's going on in a given design space. So design of experiments uses a very specific, statistically chosen pattern or layout of factor combinations so that we can build a cause and effect relationship between the input factors and the measurable output responses. We fit a polynomial model to the data that estimates this relationship and makes reliable predictions of future performance. So just, a very simple example is we can set runs from low to high. So for instance, we have factor A here going from low to high and factor B going from low to high. And given just these comparisons of low settings versus high settings, we can get the linear effect of a factor. And when we run these in combination and do all possible combinations, then we can also use this information to estimate the two-factor interaction. And so understanding, this basic structure is key to figuring out what additional runs you need in your experiment. So, just the different types of DOEs and their structures. This is going to be knowledge that you might need to gain, outside of this particular webinar. I'm just going to do a quick review here. But we have webinars on two-level factorials and fractional factorials. We have webinars on building and analyzing a variety of response surface designs, so you can get more information. So if we consider a two-level factorial, those two levels at low and high for each factor allows estimation of main effects and interactions. And this is typically used for either a screening study or a characterization study. It's the quickest way to do the minimal work for the maximum amount of information. If you have more runs, more levels, I should say, 3 or more levels for each factor, then you can estimate your quadratic terms or possibly even higher order terms and model the non-linear factor response relationships. So you can get the curvature in the design space. And often you will have subject matter knowledge that tells you that this relationship is non-linear. If you already know that, then this is the type of design you should be looking at, making sure that you do have 3 or more levels for each factor. But we often start, a DOE process will often start by just testing 2 levels to get basic information and then adding more in a sequential plan of experimentation. Now, although I'm not going to cover it today, I did want to point out that mixture designs have a little bit different design space. It's a triangular design space, and but can be built up in a similar manner from a screening design to a characterization and an optimization design. If you want to learn more about mixture designs, come back next Wednesday where Martin is going to give his crash course in mixture DOE. So that is up on our website. You can register for that if you want to learn a little bit more about mixture designs. All right, so let's just do a quick look, consideration of the goals of design augmentation. The logical first one is looking at what you have existing, and you want to be able to estimate a higher order polynomial. The original runs that you have probably, I'll just say, probably have some aliasing, especially if you're going from some historical data. Then almost certainly it has some aliasing. So the first question will be, can you even estimate your main effects cleanly? Do you have enough information to get your main effects, or do you need to first focus on estimating those? Then, can you estimate two-factor interactions cleanly? And then from there, we go on to looking at nonlinear quadratic effects. And we think about these kind of one at a time, but certainly you can augment existing runs in any way to go immediately through all of these steps and get all of them at once. Or some people like the sequential experimentation and kind of just build up a little bit at a time and make sure they're getting good information. Another goal is to improve the modeling in a particular part of the design space. So maybe you have done some initial exploration and now you want to focus on a certain area, and so you want runs in that particular space. If you either add replicates or populate the design space with additional runs in a certain area, that is going to reduce the standard error of the predictions, meaning you're going to improve your prediction capability. It's going to narrow those confidence intervals and just allow you to make better predictions. You can also confirm the fit of a specific model, especially when we add in runs that are typically called lack of fit runs. So we can test that our model fits in different areas of the design space. Ultimately, augmentation involves adding runs that fill out the design space appropriately to meet your particular goals, whatever they are. Okay, so let's get to the fun stuff. Let's look at some existing data. And first of all, we will evaluate, what we have, and then we will augment it. So step one, evaluating your current data. We're going to use a couple of pieces of design evaluation. Design evaluation has many statistics that I'm not going to get into, but I want to focus on just a couple of key things. One is the aliasing. What is the aliasing of the current set of data? What can be estimated now? And what additional terms do you want to estimate? And that's going to tell you how many more runs are needed. So what is your budget? How many more runs can you afford? Your budget is going to dictate what you can do in addition to what you have. Then the other thing I like to do is graph the data. I like to look at it if at all possible. And certainly this is easier when you're dealing with 2, 3, 4 factors. It certainly gets more complicated if you are dealing with 5 to 10 or more factors. But for what it's worth, let's try to graph the data. There are a couple of different graphs I'm going to look at. One is in the area called graph columns, is what it was traditionally called. Now, with the latest version of the software, it's called custom graphs. There is another one called the contour plot, where we can get the standard errors. So we're going to look at both of those. Now, my focus today in augmentation is going to be starting from response surface type of designs or existing data and using our optimal augmentation, which is adding runs based on the additional terms that you want. Now, there are other types of augmentation where you're starting from a 2-level factorial design, and you can do things like a fold over, which adds the opposite set of runs. So if your first run in the design was a low level, then your first run in the fold over will be a high level. So you do the opposite runs. There is something called a semi-fold over, where it does the opposite, but only 50% more runs, and there's a certain way of selecting those. There is a factorial optimal design that also adds runs based on the terms that you want. And you can take a 2-level factorial design and augment it straight into a central composite design. This will add the axial runs and more center points so that we can estimate a quadratic model. These are all really, well, at least 1, 2, and 4 are textbook augmentation types. They are easily found in the by a little bit of Google searching, and there is an older webinar that I presented that covers these. So I'm not going to cover those. I wanted to get into the optimal augmentation here and basically show you some tricks. Okay, so here is the original set of runs that was done by an R&D scientist. And so first thing is, let's look at this closely, figure out what is here. The first 4 runs here are a simple 2 by 2 factorial, right? We have a low and a high for the first factor and a low and a high for the second factor. So it's a little 2 by 2 factorial design. So from these 4 runs, we could estimate A, B, and the AB interaction. We can't build a full model with that because it's not enough runs yet, but at least we can estimate effects. Okay, so, obviously they were kind of thinking of a structure of a 2-level factorial. Then what did they do? Well, they added a center point. 400 right in the middle, 1200 right in the middle. So adding that center point starts to give them some idea about curvature. And I will just point out here, look at the numbers. This center point is actually 547, is higher than anything else that they got. So there is potential. I mean, there's a strong indication that there is nonlinearity and curvature in here. Okay, so what did they do next? Well, for some reason, I don't know why, this wasn't my data, but they did a replicate. So, this 300 and 900, that is the same as run 1. And looking at the data, they got, similar data as their first run. So that's good. And then they did one more run, which seemed like a replicate, except it wasn't. In this run, they took a third factor, which is why we've been ignoring this factor 3 all through here. But now they changed factor 3. So now we're starting to get into this one factor at a time. Let's see if we do this, and let's try this, and let's try this. And this is the point at which they came to me with these 7 runs and said, what can we do? What should be our next step? So we need to look at what we have and figure out where we need to go. Okay, so I'm going to pull up this design. We're going to look at the aliasing. So, and by the way, I am using States 360. We did just release our 2022 version of States 360. If you already have an existing active license, you should be able to go into your States account and download an update to this version. Everything that I am showing today in this webinar can also be done in Design Expert, and it can be done in Design Expert version 13, the previous version also, although the graphs have changed a little bit. All right, so over on the left side, this information section, this is where we can evaluate the design properties. I'm not analyzing this right now. In fact, this webinar is not focused on analysis at all. It's focused on the design itself. So we're going to go into evaluation, and we're going to make sure that the process order, this order, what we're evaluating, is set to quadratic. Can we, with these 7 runs, can we estimate the quadratic model? So we click results, let it calculate things, and under the alias matrix tab, it says there are 4 alias terms found in the quadratic model. The thing that complicates this aliasing is that factor C. The fact that C was set constant at the first 6 runs, and then was changed for the last run. So when we're analyzing all 7 runs, factor C is only 2 levels, so we can't estimate the squared term, and we don't have the correct combinations to get the interactions with C. So that's why we have AC and BC also aliased. Okay, so we know we would have to do at least 4 more runs to de-alias these. So we will get back to that in a minute. Aliasing is one thing that I look at, but the other thing is just simply graphing this data. So let's look at a couple of graphs. We're going to go into what's now called custom graphs. It was previously known as graph columns. And I am going to set my scatter plot. I have to do a little changing of the defaults because it's showing me, factor 1 versus the response. Well, I'm not interested in that right now. I want to see the design itself. So I am going to change my axes. The x-axis is factor 1, that's fine. The y-axis, I'm going to set that to be factor 2. And I'm going to set the z-axis, so we're going to make this 3-dimensional, to factor 3. Okay, so now I have a picture of the design space, and I am going to change this color by. Color by is kind of a nice to use. I'm going to set it to none for right now. I don't want the colors to distract us. I'm going to use that later on. Okay, so you can see here are my little 2x2 factorial. There's my replicate of that 1 extra point. There's the center point of that square. And then here is that extra run down here at the factor 3 setting of 30. Okay, so look at your existing data and decide what to do with it. Options would be just, if you want to focus on this area up here, just throw out that 3rd factor, delete that run and not worry about augmenting it. But in this case, this scientist actually wanted to fill out the design space and see what happens in this entire area. So he really did want to build out the design in these directions and add extra runs and deepen this in the direction of this factor 3. Okay, so looking at graphically here is good. I also mentioned standard error, so I'm going to pull that one up. Sorry, go to design evaluation. I'm going to go to graphs, and I'm going to go over to the contour plot. The contour plot, remember, all of these plots are just based on design information. They're not analysis. We're not looking at the data here. That's under analysis. We are looking at the properties of the design. And so here is our standard error plot. So this is the standard error of predictions. and generally lower is better. I am going to show my factors tool. Sometimes the factors tool isn't showing, and so it's always available under the view menu. And I'm also going to switch this to a 3D surface just to get another look at this. And I can just kind of see if I move factor 3 to its high level, that's going to show me the red dots for everything at that plane. You can picture that original design. So this is the variation at that plane. So you can see there's more error at these edges, a little bit less at some of the other ones. And if we would go all the way down to the low end where we don't have any other data other than that one design point, you can see how the standard error increases a lot. So we're going to add points so that we can, kind of decrease the error all over the surface here. All right, so we are going to now look at optimal augmentation. So I'm going to show you this, but I'm going to read through this first. So we are going to augment fit a full quadratic model in the existing design space. All right, so I'm going to go back to design. I'm going to go up to augment design, augment with additional runs. And we'll just take that default. And it calculates, what it can do right now. And it's a reduced quadratic model. It can't do everything. So we want to edit the model to tell it what we want. We want the full quadratic model. We want to be able to estimate those extra terms. So it says it would require 5 additional model points. That is 4 points for the terms that we need to estimate, plus 1 more point for the extra block that we're adding. Whenever we do augmentation, the default of the software is to put the new runs into a new block under an assumption that they're going to be done at another point in time. And so we need 1 more run in order to estimate that block effect also. So 5 is the absolute minimum. Then there are some defaults built in which are a good starting point. Sometimes I change these. If I wanted to add plump up the information in the model, I might add additional model points. It will select some lack of fit points, which are points, says points to make the model more robust to terms not in the current model. Basically, they're space filling points. They're going to be put in the middle of other points. And then it's going to take all of those points and replicate a couple of them. So this would be 10 additional runs. Now, we won't necessarily from this get exact center points. So if you want exact center points, you need to ask for them. And so I'm going to do that too. I'm going to put in 4 more center points. So this is augmenting with another 14 points. And, we did 7 and now we're saying, well, let's do 14 more. Is this all necessary? No, those are choices you get to make. Absolute minimum is 5, and I would never, ever do the absolute minimum because 5 is just to estimate the model, and a lot of your other statistics won't be good at that point. So you need a few extra runs beyond just the minimum. You don't need 14 necessarily, but that's what I'm going to do here. So, okay, now it pops up a warning. It's not really a warning message. It's an advice message. the design has been augmented. Since the model has changed, you might want to use design evaluation to review the new design. Do you want to go to it now? So it's really just trying to remind you, hey, when you've made changes to the design, you should look at design evaluation again. So you can click yes. It builds the extra runs. It puts the extra runs in, and you can, and then you can go to design evaluation. Okay, now I'll just say I might want to modify these. I mean, I'm making modifications anyway, so there's nothing saying that I can't modify it a little bit more, you know, so I might want to change some of these, round some of these. And that is quite okay. You know, we have a built-in rounding function now. So you can round those off. Because this is an optimal augmentation, the exact combinations that you get are not the same every single time. If you did this over and over and over, you would not get the identical results every single time. Okay, but we want to go back to evaluation and make sure it's set to a quadratic model, look at the results, and voila, it says no aliases found for the quadratic model. So that's perfect. You know, that's great. You know, from a polynomial standpoint, this is good. What about from a design space standpoint? You know, where did those runs go? Well, that's where we go back to the graphs. Let's do this again. Now, this time, I'm going to color by block, because that's going to keep my original runs one color and my new runs another color. Kind of cool. So I will set factors 1, 2, and 3. And, you know, just kind of take a look at it. You know, we can see that, you know, there's points, you know, following those lines. With the lack of fit points in, you know, we've got some extra replicates. That 4, that's the 4 center points we added, but you can see points here are in the mid range of some of these areas. Okay, so pretty nicely laid out. We've really added the extra runs. You know, the red points are your originals, and we've added enough extra runs that now we should be able to fit the quadratic model. And again, if you wanted more runs, maybe in the interior, you could add them. Let me just go back to the design and say, how would I manually add a point that I actually wanted? Well, I would right-click on one of the rows, and I would insert a row after, and I would want to include that in my block 2, because I haven't done any work yet, so I can include that in block 2, and then I can put something in. It's lined out until you fill this out. Yeah, so you can put in like an interior point, and you can add multiples of those. You can also, if there's a particular one that you wanted to replicate, you can find a row and duplicate it a couple of times. So we can add a duplicate. Okay, so manually modifying this, the design expert in Statis 360 will analyze whatever you get it. That's a really powerful thing that it can, it has capability of doing. Okay, now we also might want to go back and look at, under evaluation, look at the graphs of this design, I think I'll jump right over to the 3D surface. And, again, at the top level, here is our standard error plot, which has dropped down a little bit from the original. I'll show you a side by side of that in a minute. And then as we go to the midpoint, and as we go to the low level, it has also dropped down. So it's still a little bit grayer here, a little bit higher standard error, but not as much as it was originally. And again, you can keep doing modifications. The only way to keep reducing this is to add more runs. Okay, so look for lower standard error in the area of interest. Okay, I am going to just check questions here. Okay, I will get back to some of your questions a little bit later on. All right, so that is one case I wanted to run through, just kind of augmenting. I happened upon another interesting situation. What if you are starting with a one factor at a time set of data? Okay, so let's look at this set of data. First of all, the experimenters ran a control point a number of times. So we've got some good runs here. This is actually 4 factors here. And then they did some one factor at a time tests. So the first addition they made was taking load, the 4th factor, and doing it a little bit higher and a little bit lower, keeping everything else constant. Then they did the same for factor C, a little bit higher, a little bit lower. And then they went on to B, and then they went on to A. So this is 4 center points, followed by a low and high test for each factor while holding the other factors constant. Or it's a one factor at a time testing. This is their existing data. Now, with this data, we can estimate what would be called a reduced quadratic model. We can estimate main effects, and we can estimate quadratic terms. So we can do those. We can't get any of the interaction terms yet, so we can augment to get the interactions and test more combinations in this design space. Okay, so just another way of looking at this. The one factor at a time tested the standard and then did some tests lower and higher. Very, very typical type of experimentation. Now, let's go back to the concept of a central composite design, of really, really excellent design of experiment. Let's consider the face-centered option. A face-centered central composite looks like this. So we could take our existing data and add the factorial points to that, and then we can estimate the interactions, and we would also gain response data in these new areas of the design space. So we can force Design Expert to add these factorial points. Pretty cool. If we look at this from just a scatter plot standpoint, we are looking at, and this is just two directions, the A-B direction, but it's the same for all 4 factors. So you've got your points, low and high, for every factor, we are going to add the corner points. These would be the factorial points. Okay, so let's pull up this design. Okay, so here is our original set of runs. I do have some data, but we're not going to look at that. If we did the graph columns on this, let's see. This is 4 dimensions, but I'm kind of looking at just 3. Yeah. So you can see how those points are positioned. And you can see that we need to add those corner points. Okay, so back to fundamental concepts of DOE. A 2 to the 4th factorial design has 16 runs. That would be the full factorial design. You know, we have 4 factors. So the 2 to the 4th factorial is 16 runs. A fractional factorial is a 2 to the 4 minus 1. It is 8 runs. It is a resolution 4 half fraction, yellow. And the 8 runs is interesting, considering that we already have some existing information. I wonder if it's possible to add just 8 more runs. Would that be enough to fit the full quadratic model in the existing design space? Now, definitely adding the full 16 would be desirable. You know, more runs would improve the statistics, but, you know, would just adding 8 more do the trick? Again, we can try different things and see how it works. So we are going to dig into some things that you might never have checked before. Again, we're going to do augment design. Augment. Okay, you see how it says that the required model points is 7. We are actually going to add 1 more to that, and we're saying we're going to want 8. So additional model points, 8. Now, I am going to zero these out, and I'm not saying that I'd always want to zero those out, but I'm kind of wanting to walk you through this special case. So we're going to have 8 new runs. I don't really want to choose these entirely, you know, I want to control the optimality. So there is an option called point exchange. So the search function that we're going to use is called point exchange. That allows you to pick the types of points that you want to use. And in order to pick the points, you come down to the bottom here where it says edit candidate points. I'm going to click on that. And see this point exchange, this candidate points? It tells you all the different types of points that there are. I want to focus on vertices. See, vertices are those corners. I don't want any of these others. Okay, how many vertices are there? Well, let's click on calculate points. There are 16 vertices. Well, that makes sense, right? Because a 2 to the 4 design is 16. There are the 16 corners. So I want the software to choose my augmentation from these 16 points. Okay, so I'm going to click OK. So it's going to pick 8 points, but it's limited, restricted to just those 16. And so it chooses them, and we can go into, again, evaluation, check the results here. We're evaluating on a full quadratic model, no aliases. So we have succeeded in getting enough runs that now we can estimate main effects, two-factor interactions, and the squared terms. Looking at the graphs, again, I will color this by block. Do the factors. And you can see that, the green dots, we've added these additional runs, and you would want to check it in the fourth direction too. But it's done a great job of choosing runs that meet our needs. But you always want to check and make sure that it got the runs that you're expecting it to generate. All right, so you want to confirm that the runs meet your needs. You want to check aliasing under evaluation. You want to check graphs. If you're interested in the standard error, then you check the standard error graph under evaluation, contour or the 3D surface. You can check the custom graphs or graph columns. Build the scatter plot, look at the layout of the runs, color by block, and check multiple views. If you find any deficiencies, then you can either go back and ask the software to augment, add some more runs, or you can manually edit runs or manually add runs. There's nothing wrong with that. Just again, software can help choose additional runs, especially runs to help fit a polynomial. But your subject matter knowledge and your understanding of your goals is going to help you decide what works best. Design Expert is flexible enough that it will allow you to do all of these changes. Okay, so I'm going to do a summary, and then I'm going to look through people's questions and see what I can answer. And if I can't answer it, I will email you. Okay, so augmenting. We start with looking at the current design set. What does it look like? Look at design evaluation. What can you estimate? What gaps are there? Create pictures. All the pictures are better. Compare your results to statistically strong DOEs. How does it compare to a factorial design? How does it compare to a central composite design? Something like that. If you are starting with a 2-level factorial or some sort of fractional factorial, then fold over and semi-fold over are often the best way of augmenting. Sometimes you might want to go straight into a central composite design. So those are all options for you. For other types of designs, historical data that you're analyzing, previous experimental results that you're analyzing, then probably an optimal type of design. And sometimes you might want to do a custom point selection and really choose what types of points that you want. I mentioned don't do the minimum, and so here's my tip. Do 3 to 5 runs more than the minimum to get good analysis statistics. So you want more than just being able to estimate the polynomial. You also want good adjusted and predicted R-squared values and good diagnostics and stuff. And all of those require a few more runs than just the minimum to get. So adding in those extra runs will be good for you when you start the analysis. Yeah. So then what does a new data set look like? You got to look at the before and the after, and you compare before you've done the work, before you've actually collected the data. Modify the design until it meets your needs, then collect the data and analyze the results. I have one more little thought example for a one factor at a time. Maybe you've started at a standard and you've just expanded in one direction for each factor. Now, what's missing in this? Well, it's, again, those corner points. So you could, again, ask the software to add the vertices, and it would add those corner points. You could also augment into, do this augmentation first, and then take this and augment into a central composite and add some additional axial points, whether that's face-centered or a standard factorial. Okay, so give me a minute here to look through questions. And there are quite a number of them. So there's a question, when adding in points beyond the bare minimum, what's more important? Lack of fit, replicates, or adding center points? Where do you start? What's going to give you the most bang for the buck? So this is where your subject matter comes into play, is like, what do you want? Based on what you have, adding center points is going to give you more information in the middle of the design space, and if you think your optimum is going to be in the middle, then getting good predictions in the middle is very desirable. So adding center points might be good. Lack of fit points are kind of like center points, but they are going to be more scattered throughout the design space. They will be space filling points. So they will, be positioned usually in the interior, but in between others. So that's another way of pulling down the standard error. And then replicates. You need a few replicates in order to get your lack of fit test. So that is one reason to have replicates, is in order to actually be able to get that lack of fit test. They will also, because they are extra points, they will also bring down the standard error at those certain points, but they're not going to give you any additional information. So our default is 3 lack of fit points and 2 replicates. So that is, what we recommend as your starting point. And then beyond that, if you can do those 5, then I would probably I'd consider dropping in a couple of center points. But it's just really based on what kind of information you like. Okay, so somebody asked, can you effectively look at different factor ranges when augmenting? And the answer is yes. When another one of the augment design options is to actually modify design space. So if you want to take your existing design and move it, shift it a little bit, you can add it. You can add constraints. I'm going to skip that for right now, and I'll just show you that I could. So the current ranges are here, but like you said, I could make, I could change this and get more points in that new area. I'm still going to be able to fit a quadratic model. This is where I would probably beef up my model points a little bit. The default is a little bit shy, so I would really be wanting to make sure that I am filling this space well and then see what it gives. Augmentation is free in that you can try things, see what the software gives you. If you don't like it, just start over. I assume you have your original design saved, so you can start over and do some new things. But yes, you can shift your design space if you like. Somebody asked if these concepts apply directly to mixture designs. Yes, they do, absolutely. Same concepts, you're just in a triangular design space. And you always have to be considerate of the constraints, but absolutely the same. Somebody asked, if you already have two separate design files, like you have two central composite designs, and you want to combine them, should you augment it or just combine them? And I would simply build the one design, and then I would add enough additional rows to accommodate the second design, and I would copy and paste it right in. So I would kind of manually combine the two sets of data into one, and then you can analyze it all together. That's probably the easiest, fastest way of doing it. The software doesn't care how you get it in, because it's just going to analyze whatever you give it. So it's really just a matter of thinking about what and if your factor levels were not the same for both RSM designs, then you would want to edit the info on the factors and make sure that the low and high spans both designs. So that's all you have to do, because you have to just set the low to the high to span both of them. So Greg, hopefully that helps you out. Okay, there are quite a number of additional questions here that I am not going to have time to answer right here, but rest assured I will get all of these and send you guys an email. And then if you guys want to do any of this on your own, give it a try. If you have questions, I would like you to send those to stathelp@statease.com, and we will be happy to help you from there. If you want more foundational DOE training, I highly encourage you to consider coming to one of our classes. If you are working with process variables or anything other than formulations, then I direct you to the Modern DOE class. If you're working with mixture design and formulations, then the mixture design class is a great starting place. Our schedule is on our website, or you can contact me via workshops. So with that, I would like to thank you guys very much for staying with me today, and wish you the very best in your experimentation.